Yes, would you ask Ms. Wray to come back in, please? All right. All right, Ms. Wray, ready to carry on?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wray, I want to ask you now about priority ratings for FRA items a little bit more closely. Can I ask you, please, to be shown TMO 00840881? This is the minutes of the Operational Health and Safety meeting of the 21st of March 2014. We can see that you're present. Can we go to page 3, please? And on page 3, you can see in the middle of the page, below item 4, it says the risk allocation in the FRA actions is as per the definition set out at the beginning of the assessment programme and as agreed with the LFB. If, however, anyone feels that a risk has been wrongly assessed, please let Janice know. Now, when you refer there, or when the note refers there to the risk allocation, did it mean the priority assigned to the FRA item within Mr. Stokes' action plan?
It did, yes.
It did. And was the comment here an invitation to committee members to challenge whether that item should have been identified as a risk within the FRA at all, or to challenge the priority rating of the FRA action having been identified by Mr. Stokes?
I believe it was an effort to identify any other areas which may be causing delays in actions being completed. So I've been told that there were streamlining required and perhaps better definitions of what action to be taken was necessary, and I was trying to identify if people felt that there were other issues that needed to be addressed.
It doesn't say that, though, does it? It says, if anyone feels that a risk has been wrongly assessed, please let Janice know. What I'm seeking to establish from you, if you can help me, is whether what that meant was that a risk was identified in the FRA and shouldn't have been, or had been wrongly priority rated?
I presume the latter.
Right. Why would anybody need to challenge a priority grade set out in the action plan by your fire risk assessor?
I'm not sure that anybody did. It was just in the, I'm not aware that anybody did. I think I was just clarifying that if they had, I was trying to be clear that I could establish all of the potential issues that colleagues may have had in relation to the FRAs, and that was something that may have been one of them. I was just trying to clarify.
What had prompted you to issue that invitation to your colleagues?
I can only really refer back to what I said earlier, that there had been indications that that perhaps definitions or explanations of what was required weren't either adequate, or there'd been sort of some grumblings about some of the fire risk assessment, so I was trying to find out the detail.
Right. I mean, whatever qualifications Mr. Stokes might or might not have had, none of your colleagues were adequately trained and qualified to be a fire risk assessor, were they? And exercised the same judgments about risk level that Mr. Stokes had exercised.
Absolutely agree with you, but I was just trying to tease out if there were still grumblings or people feeling that they had issues.
Yeah. You see, what it says is anyone feels that a risk had been wrongly assessed. Now, how would anyone in your team or anybody else's team within the TMO have the knowledge, expertise, experience or training to know whether a risk had been wrongly assessed by your professional fire risk assessor?
I don't believe that they would, but that doesn't mean that they didn't think that they had. I was trying to clarify so that it could be investigated further.
Right. I think you said that nobody in fact challenged the priority assigned by Mr. Stokes, either at that meeting or subsequently.
I'm aware of one instance where it was challenged subsequently,
yes.
In relation to the Adair fire.
Yes.
But I'm not aware of any other instances.
You're not aware of any others, right. No. Now, can we also continue with that note and look at the bottom of page 2 and then to the top of page 3? FRAs is the title. These actions are now to be progressed by property. The stats presented to the meeting show for each team the total number of actions allocated through the W2 system since it was introduced on 1st of August, and the numbers which have been fully completed, partially completed, and those that remain outstanding. In order to provide each team with more comprehensive information on the status of their allocated actions, Janice agreed forward reports. Further, she agreed that in advance of future meetings, she would provide each team with a current breakdown of all their actions to supplement the summary presented to this group. The pre-W2 backlog is approximately 1,400, and Michael confirmed that he has raised orders with RD for the responsive repairs. He will provide details to Janice so that these actions can be recorded as partially complete, with the aim for them all being fully completed by end of June, in line with LFB deadline. Now, did you provide, in the event, a breakdown of each team's actions to each team going forward?
I'm sure I would have done.
Did you forward them reports?
Yes.
And how did you provide them with that information? Do you remember?
Usually by email.
Right. Did that breakdown include the colour coding to indicate the priority rating of the outstanding actions accorded to them by Mr. Stokes?
I would believe so, yes.
Right. Do you know why that information... Well, was that information also provided to those on the committee?
I can't recall.
Is there any reason why it shouldn't have been?
None that I can think of, no.
Now, we can see that the pre-W2 backlog was 1,400 actions as at that date. Are you able to explain why so many outstanding actions had accrued?
I'm not.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot, yeah.
Now, let's go to the forward in the year to the next Operational Health and Safety Committee meeting, 20th of June 2014, at TMO 1009784. 1009784. We can see that you are present.
Yes.
And if we go to page 2, in the middle of the page under FRA statistics, we can see it says JW confirmed that there had been a lot of progress for the responsive repairs in relation to the FRAs, that 121 jobs outstanding are on track to be completed by the end of June. PM highlighted that there are 30 actions which are linked to estate services training, for example, emergency lighting and smoke alarms which have been arranged. PM asked JW to clarify which of the actions could be defined as absolute requirements and which were best practice. JW to clarify how many of the actions are REDs, brackets, priorities, brackets. What information did you think Mr. Madison was seeking?
As I say here, I was going to provide him with the numbers of outstanding actions which had been classed as high priority, red. That's my understanding of what he was seeking.
It says that he asked you to clarify which of the actions could be defined as absolute requirements. What was there to be clarified?
Well, there isn't. It's just how many and which were red and stay red.
But that was a matter of seeing the colour and counting the numbers on your fingers. Why did he need your clarification of that?
I'm thinking that perhaps I didn't copy it round to everybody in the group. Perhaps I sent the breakdown to the teams and the head of. So perhaps Alex and his equivalent heads of got the breakdown and Peter just got the summary. That's all I can suggest.
You see, what he seems to be after, at least according to this document, is your clarification of which of the actions could be defined as absolute requirements and which were best practice. What was he seeking? What distinction was he seeking to draw there, to the best of your understanding, which required your clarification?
I can't really speak for Peter, but that was my interpretation, that what I would be giving him was a breakdown or the details of all of the ones which had been originally identified as high priority, because they remain high priority. I'm not going to tinker with priorities, and I would possibly have given him the original definition in that red was statutory breach, etc. Was
the truth here that he was really getting you, or seeking to get you to say that those marked red by Carl Stokes weren't really red, or a sort of slightly lighter shade of red?
I don't believe so.
In other words, could be reprioritised as lower reds than some other reds?
I don't believe so, and I wouldn't have done that. And I was the one who was controlling the W2 process, so they wouldn't have been redesignated.
But why was there any clarification required, which of course is an action point, as we can see from this, for you? Why not simply give him the action plan and say, here you are, Peter, You can see the reds on this document.
Well, that's probably what I did do.
Right.
As I say, he may not have been a recipient of that. He may have only had the high-level information, and what he needs is the granular detail, which I would have provided on request.
I mean, do you remember any discussion at this meeting about what it was that Mr. Madison was really after?
No, not really. Not more than I can have. Not more than I've already added. Sorry.
Did you not at all form the impression that he was trying to trim down the red priority actions in order to get through the backlog more quickly?
No, I didn't get that impression. He was always anxious to reduce the backlog, and from what I could see, he did try and get his teams to give it priority. He sometimes, as we've discussed, had issues about how things were defined or how things were described, or and his view of streamlining, as we said, was he wanted the assessor to tell him exactly what to do in every circumstance, and I didn't think that was appropriate, and so we didn't always agree. But no, to be fair, no, I don't think that was the case.
Well, I can see that there might be disagreement on what, as a matter of practicality, needed to be done or could be done. What I'm having difficulty with is how there could be any disagreement about whether an item marked red by Mr. Stokes was really red or not.
I don't remember a disagreement. I can't really add anything more to what I've said. I don't remember that being the case.
All right. Now let's move forward then 8 months to February 2015. TMO 00869 please. This is the minute for the Health and Safety Operational Meeting, 23rd of February 2015.
Okay.
And you are again recorded as present, as is Mr. Madison. And if you go, please, to the bottom of page 1, we need to scroll down to that. We can see another heading, FRA Stats. Do you see that there?
Yes.
JW confirmed that there had been an improvement in the number of outstanding FRAs. AB had a contractor who was undertaking the FRAs in each. After a recent review, Lancaster West had now become a priority, and JW and Siobhan Rumble are in discussions about this. And then it goes on to say, PM suggested that it would be useful to have more information in relation to the priority levels and nature of each outstanding FRA. PM and JW to discuss at a later stage. And those words are in bold, as you can see.
Yes.
JW confirmed that the team are managing and prioritising the FRAs and that there will always be some outstanding FRAs due to the nature of the assessments. JW to split the outstanding FRAs into high, medium and low categories with targets. And you can see in the right-hand column there the actions, PM and JW to have the discussion at a later stage, and JW to split the outstanding FRAs. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the bold words and the action initials correspond, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yes. Now, let's just look at those closely. First of all, taking the first one, PM and JW to discuss at a later stage, did you have a discussion with Peter Madison at a later stage?
I don't recall one. I may have had, but it doesn't leave a lasting impression on me, sorry.
No. You see, we've seen no document of any such later discussion. And had we had, you would probably have seen it preparing to give evidence, yes?
Yes, I
yes.
probably would.
So can we assume that either there was no such later discussion, or if there was, it wasn't recorded?
I think that's reasonable.
And which was it of those two? Do you know?
I don't recollect a discussion, so
Right.
I'm sorry, I can't be definite.
And then it goes to say JW to split, as we can see. Did you do that? Did you split the outstandings into high, medium and low with targets?
I believe so. I know that Peter particularly kept on asking for more detail at high level, which was fine. But actually, I think the detail that he wanted was the level that his team's head of, Alex and Co, already had. So I think I came some way towards providing high-level information that he wanted. And then when Barbara came, she made a definitive position on what we would look at every 2 months. But he could readily have access to. I mean, it would have taken 5 minutes for us to run a report and for me to identify the breakdown of his teams, and the high, medium, and low were all could be filtered. It was straightforward.
Right. Can you just explain why it was necessary to have any discussion at a later stage or at all about the level and nature of each outstanding FRA when all you had to do was put the significant findings and action plan from Mr. Stokes into Mr. Madison's hands?
I can't, because, like you say, I can't see a purpose for it, but Peter must have thought he had something he wanted to discuss.
This is the second time we've seen this in 8 months. We saw the June minute, and now we've got the February minute. And on each occasion, it looks like there's something that Peter Madison is wanting over and above you simply giving him the action plan. What was it?
I have no recollection of anything. I know that I mean, in some ways, from my perspective, it was good that he was focusing in on the FRAs and trying to identify how we could get them completed and what, if there are blockages, identifying what they were. But I can't remember anything specific. I would have always encouraged him to talk about them because it would mean that it was likely to translate into him putting more pressure onto his staff, so we would get more completed. So I wouldn't have discouraged meeting with him, but I can't remember anything specific.
But same question again, really, in relation to the second to split the outstanding FRAs into high, medium and low categories with targets. That had already been done for you by Mr. Stokes, so why was that necessary?
I can't really answer that. And it already distributed on a regular basis to Alex and co, who reported into Peter and had one-to-ones with him. So I don't know. He must have felt it was necessary and it was something I could do pretty straightforwardly, so I would have agreed to do it. But
right.
I can't really add much to what's here, really.
I mean, one rational suggestion I have to put to you is that Mr. Madison wanted you to exercise your judgment in the light of what was practicable, knowing what you knew about how the teams were managing FRA items. He wanted you to exercise your judgment to reprioritise what Mr. Stokes had already prioritised.
I don't recall having that impression, and I would never have done it, and I'm sure he would have known I would never have done it.
Now, Mr. Madison's evidence about this was that he thought that this minute recorded him asking for the same information which he'd asked for back at the Operational Health and Safety Committee meeting on the 20th of June 2014 we'd seen earlier. Do you agree with that?
Perhaps. That's
right.
possible.
Had you not provided information about priority levels and the nature of each outstanding FRA to Peter Madison before February 2015?
Yes, I would have done, but time has moved on, and therefore so would his outstanding list have changed. So he's perhaps asking for a refreshed version.
Right. But you can't help me explain why curing this in June or any time between June and February, June 14 and February 15, could not simply have been done by giving Mr. Madison the significant action plan, and particularly the one from October 2014.
No, I'm confident whatever he asked for, I would have tried to provide. I can only assume that this is a refreshed or an updated version. Right. Beyond that, I'm sorry, I can't comment, really.
Well, let's look a little later into 2015 then. TMO 100094885, please. Now, this is the minute of the meeting of the TMO Health and Safety Committee on the 16th of April 2015. And we can see that you are present. You see that?
Yes.
At this stage, I think it's right, isn't it, that the Operations Committee was still in existence? April 15.
Yes, it was for another couple of months, I believe.
Right. But this is the TMO Health and Safety Committee, properly so called. If we go to page 2, please, near the bottom of the page, we can see that there is an item under paragraph 4.1 under the heading Fire Risk Assessment FRA Update on Outstanding Actions, 4.1 W2. A paper was circulated with the latest statistics on completed and outstanding FRA actions for each team. Unfortunately, there were still significant numbers of actions outstanding, particularly for the contract management and the response repairs, RD. Janice advised that she had met with Peter Madison and also Alex, and in an effort to reduce the volume of actions highlighted by the assessor going forward, we would be setting him up with remote access to Keystone.
Yes.
This will enable him to check that items are on the asset registers and have been serviced within the required period. Obviously, for equipment/locations where our records cannot confirm this to be the case, an action will still need to be raised. Janice is to report back on her imminent meeting with John Tatum in respect of works progression by Repairs Direct. Action, Janice. Now, the minutes refer to a meeting which had taken place between you, Alex Bosman and Peter Madison to reduce the volume of actions, so it seems from this. Do you remember what was discussed at that meeting?
I don't remember. I don't remember specifically, but it leads on to the discussion about remote access to Keystone for the assessor. So I'm therefore assuming that it was partly about the volume of significant findings and actions that related to provision of evidence for completed maintenance checks.
And apart from providing Carl Stokes with access to the Keystone database, do you know what other measures had been implemented in order to reduce the numbers of outstanding FRA items?
I can't recall as I sit here now, sorry. Because they were both involved, then it would have been a wider ranging conversation, presumably about all of their actions and whether there were, how they were doing, how they were going to expedite them. But I can't remember the detail other than the Keystone issue.
Do you remember why Mr. Stokes had not been provided with access to the Keystone database before April 2016?
No, I mean the Keystone the Keystone database was constantly under development, and I think the initial records that went in and were comprehensive were, I think, possibly gas servicing. So it was being developed, and they were adding one particular contract at a time. So it's possible that if he had early access, he still wouldn't have had any of the information that he actually required. By this time, I think it had electrical installation checks and probably maybe lightning protection. I'm not too sure. So there may have been things that he would have regularly been requesting that he could now remotely access, but possibly they're possibly only been comprehensively reviewed recently. Right. I don't know, to be honest. It depends when they all came on stream.
Do you know when Keystone did come on stream?
So Keystone had been around for, I think, it was around when Salvis. We've had it for a number of years, but it's being developed, and each specific contract is being added, I think, pretty much one at a time to make sure that all of the certificates have been audited and that everything that's going in there meets the required standard. And so it was a fairly rigorous process, but I think they were doing it one contract at a time. So what I'm saying is I think that perhaps it took until this sort of time before the information stored there was the information that was being requested by the assessor.
I see. You didn't provide Mr. Stokes with access to W2, did you?
No, I didn't. I don't even know if we could have provided it remotely. I don't think remote access was something that was readily available. I think it was just in terms of Keystone.
Right. Did you inquire as to whether it was possible?
No, but I'm pretty confident it wasn't. But I don't remember specifically inquiring.
Right. Was it not possible to provide Mr. Stokes periodically, at least, with snapshots or runoffs from the W2 database?
Yes, of course.
Did you do that?
I possibly did. I don't recall. He understood how the system worked. I would have shown him the spreadsheets. Yes, that was definitely possible, pretty straightforwardly, really. But I may have. I think I probably did in relation to specific blocks where he was requesting progress updates. But I don't know that I ever gave him a complete report of the whole.
Right. Other than contract management, this minute identifies responsive repairs or repairs direct as a particular focus for outstanding actions, and it looks as if you plan to meet John Tatum regarding works progression by repairs direct. Did that meeting take place? Do you remember?
Probably it did, because I was meeting with John Tatum, was the response repairs manager, and it was him and his predecessors and his successors that I was regularly meeting and cajoling and trying to get an understanding of why we weren't completing the responsive actions.
We move on then in time to the end of July 2015. TMO 100100039. And this is the minute of the Health and Safety Committee meeting held on the 31st of July 2015. We can see that Barbara Matthews is present in the chair. Was that her first Health and Safety Committee meeting?
I believe it was, yes.
Yes, and you're identified as second in attendance there. If we go to page 3, please, again, section 4.1, FRAs, W2 workflow, there's a long text there. Yeah. And you can see that there's discussion of the statistics, and it says Barbara highlighted the level of outstanding actions, particularly for contract management and also the responsive repairs. You see that? Now, you produced a statistics paper, didn't you, for that meeting?
Yes.
and if we can look at that, it's at TMO 100096662. And we can see there that this is an analysis of an overall breakdown of FRA actions and the total, and we can see that the fully completed are 941, partially completed 95, and outstanding 814. Was it that figure that she suggested, that Barbara Matthews suggested was too high?
I would say so, yes.
Yes. Why were there so many outstanding actions?
I'm really struggling to give you answers to these questions because the actions fell outside of my control. We asked questions, we challenged, but I can't really give you a definitive view from the teams who weren't completing the actions, because no doubt there were lots of things that I was not aware of. I know, as we've said, that there were sometimes issues with contractors, there were sometimes issues with the volumes of work, but I can't really give you a meaningful answer because I don't have it.
See, we've seen you historically expressing concern about the level of outstanding actions as early as, if it was early, 2012. We've seen the Hodgson report, draft and final, July and September 2013. This is now 2 years later. Why had you or your team not got on top of resolving the problems with outstanding FRA actions by this time?
But you appreciate that my role was to allocate and chase and escalate and do everything I can. And I was doing that, but it clearly wasn't enough. Well,
what was the problem?
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. As we sit here now, those teams, I can't give you chapter and verse for why these things were not happening. I can tell you what I was advised of, and I have done. But I'm not in a position to give you all of the reasons why these are outstanding. I'm sorry, I'm just not.
No, but you might be able to give me a reason for not taking a step back and asking yourself the question I've asked you, which is, given that Matt Hodgson had raised this problem in the summer of 2013, how could it come about that 2 years later, such a significant proportion of FRA actions remained outstanding? Did you ask yourself that question?
Of course.
Did you ask anybody else
Repeatedly.
that question?
Yes, regularly, whenever I was going to have conversations with Alex Bosman and John Tatum and all of those people, repeatedly and ongoingly. And when I was escalating it to Anthony, and then at this stage, Barbara, Sasha in the ops group, all of those people. You can see from all of the minutes that they were being raised repeatedly and statistics were being circulated repeatedly.
Now, looking at the breakdown, if we go to page 2, we've got some data there. We can see that 382 of the outstanding actions had been assigned to A&R contract management. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Why were so many actions outstanding for that team?
Because they hadn't been completed.
Well,
because we hadn't got their, whatever it was that was covered, which was often maintenance certification, hadn't been provided, and I can't close them down until I've had sight of those things. It'll be in a whole range of matters, but unless I've got evidence that they're completed, I can't close it down.
No, clearly. But my question is really a slightly more profound one, which was, well, what was the problem, particularly with contract management, that meant that so many items, 382 in all at that time, were outstanding?
They did get a substantial volume of actions, partly because the fire information and couldn't be accessed remotely on Keystone, because that would have prevented a volume. And sorry, as we sit here now, I don't know that I can give you what you need from me. I can't give you an undertaking of why that is the case. But all of the contract management issues sat in one place. So there was clearly problems with either getting the certification or just providing it to me. Some of those will have been complicated things that maybe needed procurement. So some of them will have been challenging in terms of time to complete. But I'm sorry.
And would the same answer be given by you in relation to the figure for responsive repairs that we see at the bottom of that page, 297?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to page 3, please. Of the minute, back to the minute. It's TMO 100100039. And we can see there at paragraph 4.1, which I picked out to you before, 6 lines up from the bottom of that section, the minutes record as follows. Barbara advised, do you see?
Yes.
Yes. Barbara advised that more information on the outstanding FRA actions needs to be provided to the committee. Although the total provided an indication, they do not provide the full picture. Janice was requested to investigate, providing a more meaningful breakdown of outstanding actions so that the committee are better able to see the detail on what work programme will be required to clear them. Now, that's gave rise to an action item on the right-hand side in that column. J. Ray to provide a more comprehensive breakdown of outstanding FRA actions for next meeting. You see that?
Yes.
What information did Barbara Matthews consider, so far as you remember, was missing so that the full picture wasn't clear to her?
Sorry, without looking at the associated stats for that.
Well, we can have. I'm happy to put it back up again. We can have them.
I mean, it may be that I hadn't included the high, medium, low. I'm not really sure.
Right. You say that, and indeed it is true that you didn't.
Okay.
Was that what, to the best of your recollection, was that what she was after?
What I recall is I believe that we then started to add the priorities, and possibly not at that stage, perhaps later, we then started to have an age profile within the priorities, so you could see how many of the high that were outstanding were aged 3 to 4 months and so on. So it became... there was sort of, it developed, sorry. It developed as people were more specific about what they wanted to see and how they wanted it to be provided.
Yes.
And that enabled Barbara to see very clearly, we still knew that we had 300 plus still outstanding in terms of Alex's team. However, it meant that 300 could be divided. You could see very clearly what was very historic and what had recently been added.
Right. So you're identifying, I think, 2 further kinds of data. Is this right? First of all, the risk level, high, medium, low.
Yes.
And secondly, what you call an aged profile. So 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 months to 12 months, all that kind of...
Yes.
I see. Can I just ask you, I mean, clearly that information had not been collated and presented to the TMO Health and Safety Committee before this time. Why did it take the arrival of Barbara Matthews to identify that omission in the data?
I'm not really sure that anyone had asked for it before, and the teams who were responsible for the actions were getting their specific data on a very regular basis. So, yeah, I mean...
I mean, she had clearly seen something you hadn't. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes.
She's the executive director. That's her role.
Right. And can you account for why she had seen it but you hadn't?
No, I can't.
Now, on the same day, you attended, at 2 p.m, you attended an operational health and safety committee meeting, also with Barbara Matthews and Peter Madison. And that we find at TMO 1009039. Let's just look at the first page of that. There it is, and we can see who is there. And if we go, please, in the document to page 4, item 3.2, halfway down, you can see that the minutes record as follows. RD have reviewed all the FRAs and health and safety actions, currently waiting for RD to programme that work, and will then raise the orders for the blocks. BM asked to see the key things and the timing for it. PM asked for a breakdown by a priority and age to make it clear where the risks are. There needs to be an ongoing breakdown of the list. PM suggested a meeting to discuss interface between RD and AB's team. CM to organise meeting with a PM, AB, Chris Davis and JW. Now, working one's way through the forest of initials, it's fair to say, isn't it, that this was a yet further request by Miss Matthews and Mr. Madison, certainly, for more ongoing detailed information about outstanding FRA actions.
Yes.
Yes. Did you take any action as a response to that, in response to that request?
Yeah, I believe so.
What did you do?
Well, I presume you're going to take me to the next set of minutes and we'll know.
I am.
But I believe that I would have endeavoured to meet their requirements.
Right. And again, was there any question posed of you about why these matters were still being examined, if that's the right word, in July 2015 when Matt Hodgson had picked these issues up 2 years before? Was that not something raised with you?
I don't recall it being raised with me.
Right. And now, if we go to the next meeting, this is the 29th September 2015, TMO 100444175. I'll show you page 1. By now, I think the Operations Health and Safety Committee had fallen away and everything was being dealt with by the Corporate Health and Safety Committee, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. You can see the date at the top. You can see who was present, you included, as well as Barbara Matthews and Peter Madison. If we go to page 2, please, bottom of page 2, we'll see paragraph 3.1. There it is. There have been an additional 200 completed actions since July, added that the age profile needs to be monitored carefully going forward.
Yeah.
Was it your responsibility to monitor those actions?
It was my responsibility to have oversight of the FRA process, but in terms of monitoring compliance, then that wasn't my exclusive responsibility. It was the Health and Safety Committee, and that included me, obviously, and the Executive Director with Health and Safety responsibility. Right.
You see, where PM adds that the age profile needs to be monitored carefully going forward, it looks as if there's on the face of it, an implicit criticism that the age profile had not been monitored as carefully as it should have been. Was that the case?
No, I don't think it was the case. I mean...
Well, what did Mr. Madison mean when he says that the age profile needs to be monitored carefully going forward?
Well, exactly what it says, that we should continue monitoring it going forward. I mean, we'd been providing significant amounts of information to each of the teams with all of the status of all of their actions on a regular basis. So the information was readily available, and they just were requesting that I provided more in my summary, my high-level summary to the Health and Safety Committee. And I've taken that on board. I think that is all he means. It's just...
So did you, as a result of this request from Mr. Madison, change your approach so as to provide an aged outstandings?
I believe so.
I see. Let's then just turn the page, please, to the top of page 3, paragraph 3.2. It says, AB had been going through the list of actions and allocating them to the appropriate contractor.
Yep.
PM confirmed that the data will be cleansed in a meeting tomorrow. Just pausing there, what was that about? What was cleansing the data about?
I have no idea.
No. PM also met with JW to discuss streamlining the process. What did that mean, streamlining the process?
I think it just refers back to what we've mentioned before about, where possible, Peter wanting Carl to say, this is what you need to do, rather than give a range of options. That's my recollection.
Right. I see. Do you remember the content of the actual discussion about what it was that Mr. Madison was proposing?
No, sorry.
His evidence was that he'd felt that the wording of the FRAs needed to be more precise and specific so that you could actually action them and turn them instantly into a form of words for a works order, rather than sending a team out to investigate, particularly if it's not in their area of expertise. That's the flavour of what Heath understood, and that's day 123 at page 46, line 18 and following. But does that give the flavour of what you understood him to mean?
Yes. I mean, he wanted it to be as unambiguous as possible, which is entirely desirable. But he did want to be very quickly able to convert the required action into an instruction for a contractor. That isn't always going to work completely, but where it was possible, then we would endeavour to try and do it.
No, so you told us earlier, it was your evidence, I think yesterday as well as this morning, that so far as you were concerned, it was for the TMO to decide what to do, but for the fire risk assessor to decide where the defects were, the omissions were, in compliance.
That's right. And my point is that in circumstances where there is only one option and a call can only provide one option, then it's legitimate for him to provide it in a form of words
Right.
that, if it's acceptable to him, could then be lifted and put into a works order.
Yes. I mean, was it your view at the time that Mr. Madison hadn't really understood the role of the fire risk assessor and was asking him to do something that he wasn't really either qualified to do or had time and space to do?
I think he was just looking, he saw a problem and he was looking at possible ways of moving it forward.
I understand that, but I understand that entirely.
Sorry.
But was it your understanding that Mr. Madison hadn't really understood the limits of what a fire risk assessor can do, and was perhaps putting or seeking to put more onto Mr. Stokes' shoulders than was practicable?
I don't know if I agree with that. I think, just to go back to what I said before, I think he was looking at ways of resolving problems. I think providing we pushed back and said that's not legitimate or that's our role, then I think he largely accepted that.
Let's look at TMO 100100066. This is the Health and Safety Committee meeting document. It looks like the figures which were prepared for that meeting. If you look at page 1, and you could see the overall breakdown of FRA actions and the total outstanding, 812. And if we go to page 3 to start with, we can see that this is the breakdown of neighbourhood management actions, FRA actions. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then if you go to page 4, you can see that those statistics are then broken down further into categories, total number outstanding, and then you've got outstanding since 2013, 2014, 2015 across the page. Yes? Yes. And this one also produced in November 2015 in the same format. We don't need to go to it, but the reference is TMO 100111191 at pages 4 and 5. What was it that caused you to alter the format to this more detailed breakdown?
I was following up on what had been requested of me
Yes.
at the previous meeting, but also I discovered that there was a possibility of extracting the statistics from the W2 system that I had previously been unaware of the detail of, and that's where this was lifted from.
I see, but this was in response, I think, was it, to Mr. Madison's long-standing requests for more detail?
Yes.
Yes. And also, in part, your own discovery of the functionality of the W2 system.
Yes.
Yes, I see. Then, if we go into 2016, TMO 100119110, TMO 100119110, Health and Safety Committee meeting minutes 9th of January 2016.
Yeah.
This is an FRA summaries report for that meeting. And if you scroll through to page 4, just looking at it, let's scroll through the pages. That's page 1. That's page 2, age profile of outstanding actions. Now we can see the age profile. Page 3 is a health and safety inspections and RA team summary. And then page 4, progress with completing actions. It's rather less detailed, isn't it, than the detailed reports that you'd produced for the September and November TMO Health and Safety Committee meetings. And I say that because it's got no colour-coded breakdown, as we'd seen in September and November 2015.
Okay, but these are health and safety inspection actions, not fire risk assessment actions, and they wouldn't be categorised in the same way. These are the health and safety and property risk assessments are what my colleague Adrian does when he's out on site. And these actions relate to his findings, so that they wouldn't be categorised high, medium, low in the way that the fire risk assessment. The further up in the document, that is fire risk assessment.
Yes.
We'd actually merged. The information was put together in the one appendix.
Oh, well, let's just be a bit more constructive about this. So pages 1 and 2 relate to fire team and fire risk assessments, don't they?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Well, look at 1.
Fire risk assessment
Fire risk
summary.
team summary.
Yes.
And then you've got the groups again, and then you've got fully completed, outstanding, partially completed.
Yes.
And you've got still some big numbers, haven't you, for outstandings, relatively, for contract management and responsive repairs, yes?
Yes.
And then page 2, progress with completing action, same again, but this time you do have an age profile, but you've got no risk, you've got no colour-coded risk there.
No.
Why did that disappear?
Could you scroll down to the next page?
Yes, of course, page 3.
Okay. I prepared this. It actually took longer than you would think, and I think I may just have run out of time in order to split it between the different. So I think it was just time, unfortunately.
I see. Okay. Now then, if we go to the minutes of this meeting, that's at TMO 00840500. That's the meeting at which the documents were presented.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, first page, you can see the date, 19th of January 2016.
Yes.
You were there. And then if we go to page 4, near the top of the page, we can see again that Peter Madison paragraph 3.2, Peter Madison says, PM asked for a copy of the detail behind this report. PM noted that the system should be more robust to ensure actions are escalated if they are out of time or allocated to staff who are no longer with the organisation. GW advised the process will be reviewed to avoid outstanding historic actions. What further detail was Mr. Madison after now?
I don't actually know, because we're providing lots of detail to all of the teams with direct responsibility for the actions. We're providing that regularly. They can see very clearly the risk profile and the age profile, and this is just an additional tier to let the subcommittee the committee have scrutiny at their level, and all of the teams sit under people who are at this committee, and they have all of the details. So I'm actually not sure. And it got to this stage where I was spending quite a lot of time producing the report, and I think there was a limit to what I could reasonably, put into it.
But was he asking that the data that you had included in your September and November reports, which we saw with the colour coding, be reinstated, for example? Was that what he was after?
It doesn't say that here, so...
No. Well, that's why I'm asking you.
I would think that if he was, that I would have made sure that was minuted, so that I was absolutely clear.
See, the problem with this data, even at this stage, is that you can't see which actions are post-date. In other words, which have gone past their due date, nor can you see what level of risk priority they have. I mean, why is that critical data missing? Particularly given that it had been requested for months now by Mr. Madison.
I can only reiterate what I'm telling you is that I was constantly sending out tracker information to all of the teams. So all of the heads of who were in a position to action the actions had all of that on a regular basis, could run their own, had access to W2.
Yes, but sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. That may be downstream, but this is upstream. This is up to top or nearly top management within the health and safety sphere within the TMO. Why not give them a single set of data which tells you how many what FRAs were outstanding within each contract group, how long each one had been outstanding for, whether it was past due, and what its level of risk was, so that someone like Barbara Matthews or Peter Madison could actually get a grip on this at a glance?
I can't give you an explanation other than time. That actually it took longer than you think it did to produce it, so I produced what I could, and the level of detail here I appreciate isn't as comprehensive as it should have been or could have been, but it still gives a fairly accurate flavour of what's outstanding and the age profile of what's outstanding. And yes, there could have been more, but I still think there's quite a lot of information here in which to make a judgment.
Did you go to Peter Madison or Barbara Matthews and say, look, in order for me to produce this data in a form which is really readily digestible by you so that you can take executive decisions on it, I need more help. I need an extra pair of hands. It's going to take me all day, twice a week to do this. I haven't got time. Did you ever have a conversation with either of them along those lines?
I didn't have that conversation with Peter Madison. I may well have had that conversation with Barbara. But Barbara also was fairly exacting about what she wanted. So I think I probably tweaked this again subsequently in order to get what she wanted at that level, at that meeting.
Was it the position, and forgive this question, that you needed help but didn't realise it? Or was it that you realised you needed help but for whatever reason just didn't ask for it?
I could have always used more resource. It was pretty obvious that I could have always used more resource, but that wasn't going to be made available. That wasn't available. So I had to work within the constraints of what I had. And I reprioritized and always tried to make sure that I identified the highest priority things. And it may be that when it came to producing this report, something else on that day was of significant importance, and therefore I didn't have the time to provide that level of detail. But I can't tell you because I wouldn't have kept that detailed record.
You see, you say in your last answer that more resource wasn't going to be made available, it wasn't available. How did you know that?
I just know that. I just know that.
If you didn't ask, you wouldn't know, would you?
Yeah, well, I would have asked Anthony, and in those days, and it just wasn't available.
Did he ever say to you, or Barbara Matthews ever say to you, you can't have any more help, tough luck, you'll just have to manage as best you can, but by the way, we need all this granular data?
No, they wouldn't have said that.
No. Can I then ask you to look, please, at page... yes, I'm sorry, we're still on this note, 3.2. He notes there, or says there, that there are actions being allocated to staff who are no longer within the organisation. What were actions being allocated to staff who were no longer with the TMO?
No, they weren't. But when people left the organisation and I went to the respective team and said, this person has left, he has a W2 inbox with actions, who do I reallocate them to? That didn't always get a straight answer immediately.
Right. Why was that? Is it because there was no one?
Perhaps there might have been an interim and they knew that person was there for a short term, or I can't really, I just know that there was sometimes a delay, which meant that they were sat in a box. So I was lobbying to get an answer. So I was well aware of that being a problem, occasionally, not often, but actually particularly in relation to responsive repairs where we seem to turn over staff.
And it says here that Peter Madison asked that the system should be more robust to ensure actions are escalated if they're out of time. Were actions not being escalated even though they were out of time?
They were escalated to the heads of, to Alex, who was heads of contract management. Right. They were escalated to the head of repairs. There were regular meetings with all of those people. I would go and speak to those people. I would physically sometimes take them a copy of their tracker and highlight the things which were out of time. Right. So, yes, they were being escalated.
They were. But you see, the impression given by this is that the system needed to be robust to ensure actions are escalated if they're out of time, which rather suggests that they weren't being.
It does suggest that, yes. But that
was that the case?
No, it isn't the case. And to be honest, Peter wasn't really involved in the detail, in the day-to-day detail of it, so he wouldn't necessarily have known what we had in place to escalate issues.
What was your view of Mr. Madison's suggestion that the system needed to be more robust?
My view was that the system was reasonably robust. Where it broke down was actually translating the actions into completed bits of work, and that sat with the respective operations teams.
Why didn't you tell Peter Madison that and have it recorded in the minute?
I probably did tell him that, but it's not recorded in the minute.
No. All right. Now then, in 2016, April 2016 now, further meeting of the Health and Safety Committee, TMO 100130060. This is the meeting of the 12th of April 2016, page 1. There you are, in attendance, as well as Barbara Matthews and Peter Madison. If we go to page 3, item 4.1, near the middle of the page, it says, JW welcomed the significant drop in the number of outstanding actions for both FRAs and H&S actions, BM acknowledged the progress made and advised that the Chief Executive remained anxious that all actions older than 6 months should be completed as a matter of urgency. A boss, that's I think Alex Bosman, added that his team currently has a further 50-plus actions which have been confirmed as complete and will be fully completed on W2 ASAP. Now, let's look at the statistics which we understand you produced for this meeting at TMO 100126642. Now, the meeting date is the 12th of April, 2016. The document that I'm showing you now on the screen is dated the 6th of April 2016, 10 days beforehand. Okay. According to its file names, we've been able to identify it. And there's an email of the 8th of April which attaches this document. We don't need to go to it. It's TMO 100126661. That is the basis on which I'm putting to you that this document was what was presented to the 12th of April meeting.
I tried to get the papers out in advance so people had a chance to scrutinise, so it's quite likely to be the case.
Very good. Now, on that basis, let's look at this document. You can see that in the outstanding column on page 1, there is a total of 243 outstanding FRA actions.
Yes.
Yes? And if we examine the previous breakdown produced by you, which was the 18th of January 2016, so 4 months before, let's have that at the same time. TMO 100111910, TMO 100111910. We can see that there were 296 actions outstanding.
Okay.
So we look at the figure for January, 296 in the second column there, and we look at the figure in the second column, 243. Mm-hmm. Just looking at the figure for outstanding actions, it's only reduced by 53 actions since the previous meeting. Why was this considered to be a significant drop?
But we've added 300 more actions, haven't we, in the meantime? The total actions allocated originally were 2,206, and now they're 2,515, if I'm reading that correctly.
You are, yes.
So we have added significantly more, and the fully completed total reflects that, doesn't it? From 1,794 to 2,132. So I think overall there was a significant movement in the right direction.
Well, I can see that it's probably not negligible, but maybe we're quibbling about the word significant. But mathematically, it's correct, isn't it? Yes. That the number of outstandings went down from 296 to 243, so by 53.
Yes.
Yes, and although one has to allow for the increase in new allocated actions, you're not able to tell me how many of those were or weren't past due by that date.
I'm sorry, no.
No. September 2016 is where we next go. TMO 00840753. Health and Safety Committee, 13th September 2016. Page 1, you're there. Barbara Matthews is there.
Yes.
Yes? Yes. Now we see that. Now, page 2, please, paragraph 4.1. Under FRA actions, BM, that's Barbara Matthews, raised concern that there was still a volume of actions outstanding.
We haven't got there yet, Mr. Bennett.
No, we haven't. I'm sorry. Page 2, 4.1. BM raised concern that there was still a volume of actions outstanding and reiterated the need for these to be given priority and completed ASAP. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you explain why there was still an ongoing issue with FRA actions still not being given priority and being completed as soon as possible? This is now September 2016.
No, some of them will be complex, but I don't have the detail, and I can't give you an explanation. It really would be for the contract management team and the repairs team to provide the detail, and I don't have that, I'm afraid.
I mean, clearly, you were at the meeting. Your boss says she's concerned about the volume of actions.
Yeah.
What did you explain to her that either her concern was misplaced or that so far it was justified, you were sorting out the problem?
Barbara was very clear on the process. She knew where the actions sat, and she knew who was responsible for completing them. So it was a forum where quite a lot of those people were present or were represented, and it's her opportunity to make her position clear that people needed to give them the priority that they were due. Everybody with actions under the FRA needed to treat them with priority. She wasn't directing that solely at me.
The word outstanding there, do you remember that she was concerned that there was still a volume of actions which were outstanding whenever the due date was, or past due? Did outstanding mean past due in that context there?
I believe it meant actions in need of being completed, because that was always my perspective. I wouldn't have... I mean, we had the age profile, so we can see what age those are that are still outstanding have. But in my view, outstanding means things that have been identified and need to be completed but have yet not been completed.
With respect, I wonder if that's really a right way of understanding it. You see, she says, according to this note at any rate, that she's concerned that there's still a volume of actions outstanding and reiterated the need for these to be given priority and completed ASAP. She's clearly directing herself to the actions which aren't simply outstanding, but which have remained outstanding past their due date. Otherwise, everything would be a priority, wouldn't it?
They are of higher priority, yes, but she wants them all completed. We both do.
But what's the these then? These, what the need for these to be given priority? What did you understand she wanted to be given priority?
The fire risk assessment actions.
All of them?
Yes.
How could all of the fire risk assessment actions be given priority?
Well, the teams who have acquired these actions have other responsibilities as well. I think she's trying to say, can you treat this as one of your main priorities in your overall scheme of what you're doing?
Well, in priority to what?
Well, the other activities that they're responsible for progressing. You've got contract management team who monitor contractors and let contracts and do all the range of things that they do. In addition, unless I've got the wrong end of the stick.
Well, I'm just wondering, because if you look at that first line, with the reference there being still a volume of actions outstanding,
Yes.
You were always, as you've explained to us, there were always going to be some requirements outstanding because new requirements were coming up all the time. So the natural emphasis of that is things that have been outstanding for a long time, isn't it? I overdue.
Well, perhaps, but that
Otherwise,
wasn't...
it's just a statement of the obvious.
Yeah, but sometimes that's necessary. I mean, because we'd struggled with this, I think she was taking every opportunity to get people to give it the priority that it required. I mean, you may be right and I may be wrong, but I can only tell you that my
Well, you were there and I wasn't. But,
I wish I could remember all of it.
I'm just reading this as it hits me off the page. But if you can remember a different tenor to the meeting, well, then obviously tell us.
I think because we had struggled with these for so long, I don't think she was going to be seen to take a position where it's okay, you don't have to worry about these so much, you need to I think she wanted the message to be consistent, and she didn't want to give anyone an opportunity to go, well, you didn't tell us to concentrate on that.
Right.
But hopefully she can advise you herself.
Well, possibly, as the chairman has said, you were there. I mean, there are two possibilities, aren't there? Either that she's expressing concern about the sheer number of actions, whether in an FRA from yesterday or an FRA from 6 months ago, because of the size of the estate and the state of the buildings. That's one possibility, which would mean all of them. The other possibility is that she's concerned that there is a volume of actions outstanding, meaning past due, which needed priority. Which of those two alternatives did you understand her to be expressing concern about?
I believe that she was talking about fire risk assessment actions per se, that they had to be given priority. Clearly, ones which are older will need to be done as the utmost priority, but they all need to, and ongoing, they all need to have priority. In the job role that you do, you must you must treat this with utmost priority.
Now, she gives us a bit of assistance on this in her first statement.
Okay.
TMO 100 49987. That's the first page of her first statement to the inquiry.
Okay.
And at page 7 of that statement, paragraph 35, she says this. Page 7, paragraph 35. Thank you, yes. She says this: if there were outstanding actions arising from the FRA programme, I would emphasise the importance of clearing out outstanding actions as a matter of urgency at health and safety meetings. By way of example, in a Health and Safety Committee meeting on 19th January 2017, I requested that each team with outstanding actions prepare a written report for the next meeting, setting out the detail of each action and an explanation of what steps had been taken to progress these and when each would be fully completed. I recall that this led to a mass clearing of actions. I should say that while these were not actions that fell on my department but in my role as chair of the committee, I was anxious to do what I could to get the number down. Now, she refers there to emphasising the importance of completing outstanding actions generally,
Yes.
and specifically to requesting written reports. Other than those two examples, do you know what else, if anything, Ms Matthews actually did, or any other senior TMO manager, to help complete FRA actions?
I think when we discussed this earlier, I'm aware that she would have had dialogue with Sasha Jevons and also Peter Madison, Alex Bosman, Graham Webb, all of the people whose teams were responsible for progressing actions. I know that she was proactive about her health and safety responsibilities. She also had a remit in relation to Repairs Direct, so she had quite a lot of dialogue with Graham, and I know this is something that she would have discussed with him. So she had all of that going on. I'm sure she would have engaged her exec team colleagues quite vigorously about it as well.
Yes. Now, let's look at the 19th of January 2017 meeting. The minutes of that meeting are at TMO 100160020. This is the meeting she's referring to by way of her exemplar. And if you go to page 1, you can see that she was there, you were there, Mr. Madison was there. If we go to page 2, paragraph 4.1, she says, under the heading FRA Actions, BM raised concern that there were a large number of actions outstanding that are over 12 months. At the next meeting, each of the teams with outstanding actions will need to explain their action plan to clear these down. And certainly in this meeting, she's identifying the large number of actions outstanding that are over 12 months, not outstanding as of yesterday, because we had an FRA yesterday. That was, I suggest to you, the nature of her concern, wasn't it?
I think it was one of the nature of her concern. I think she was concerned to get everyone to take this responsibilities seriously and to progress whatever action they needed to take. Clearly, anything over 12 months was going to be in the spotlight and should be done as a matter of utmost priority, and that's what she's trying to achieve. But I don't think it was confined to that.
But that's the burden of it, though, isn't it? That's the thrust of it. That she's concerned here that there are lots of actions which are well past due, not that there are lots of actions.
Well, it's not. I think we could debate this. I disagree.
I can only go on the note, and
I know. And what I would say is often the detail of the meeting isn't all covered in the note. So sometimes I think perhaps. My recollection, if not from this meeting, from my endless discussions with Barbara about fire risk assessments, RRO, all of those, is she felt very strongly that the organisation needed to do whatever it could to take all of their responsibilities serious, and that meant completing actions allocated to them in the right time frame. So yes, this is what it says here. I agree with you, but I think it is wider than that.
Now, was your understanding that only the teams with actions outstanding over 12 months were required to provide an explanation, or were all teams with any outstanding actions of any vintage to provide their action plan?
It was my understanding that all teams should come along armed with, if not in writing, they should have at least a verbal update on why they had actions outstanding.
See, that wasn't the reason I'm asking you this. Is that wasn't Mr. Madison's understanding. His understanding, day 123, page 98, line 17, was that he thought that only teams with actions older than 12 months needed to provide a report. But that doesn't sound as if that was what your understanding was.
It wasn't my understanding.
Right. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment? We're still midstream with this, but we're making decent.
No, it's probably as good a time as any, isn't it? Yes. We'll have the afternoon break now then, Ms. Wray. We'll resume at 3:30, please. And again, don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you. Right, 3:30 then, please. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Ms. Wray to come back in, please? All right,
Yes.
ready to keep going?
Yes.
Well done, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can I ask you next, please, to look at TMO 100162217? Now, this is a document entitled FRA's Current Progress with Completion of Actions, Paper 4, 10th of March 2017. You see that?
Yes.
10th of March 2017. Can you confirm that those are the statistics that you prepared for and presented to the TMO Health and Safety Committee meeting on the 16th of March?
Yes, they would have been.
Yes. Now, if we go to page 3 of that document, you'll see that there's a section, breakdown of actions remaining incomplete after 12 plus months. Were those the written explanations provided to Barbara Matthews that she had asked for?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
I think some people did provide a verbal update instead of providing something in writing.
Right. You can see that there are only 2 entries here.
Yes.
Yeah. Why is that?
That was all I received.
Right. I see. Was there any discussion at the meeting about whether those were considered a sufficient explanation by members of the committee or by Barbara Matthews herself? Do you know?
It was certainly discussed, and the repairs and the contract management, which isn't here, I believe provided a verbal update on their position. And there would have been quite a wide-ranging discussion.
Looking at the text under Health and Safety Team, did you write that text?
Probably.
Right. It says the majority of the actions, 28, which remain incomplete after 12 months, relate to tenanted flat entrance doors and or transom lights or side screens, which have been highlighted as potentially not compliant. In some cases, doors have been changed. The assessor has requested confirmation that replacement doors are compliant with current requirements. Sometimes a temporary door has been fitted and never been replaced with a compliant door. Orders have been raised but have been abandoned, sometimes due to non-access, but no escalation has been undertaken, so action remains outstanding.
Yes.
Was the TMO's approach to replacement of flat entrance doors, what was the TMO's approach to replacement of flat entrance doors identified by Mr. Stokes as requiring confirmation of compliance with current requirements?
As and when doors were required, they are required to meet the current standards. So they should be an FT30S, self-closing FT30S. As part of his assessment, he would identify doors which he was concerned were potentially non-compliant, or he didn't recognise, or they weren't in keeping with the others in the block. In this case, it looks like the first thing we would do is check whether they're tenanted doors or leasehold doors. Where they're tenanted doors, we would try and get information from the repairs team when the door had been replaced. Can they confirm that it meets the current standards? As you can see, that wasn't always as easy as it should have been. If they'd been replaced because there'd been an emergency, sometimes there had been a temporary door placed there for forced entry or whatever reason. I think sometimes repairs weren't good about remembering to go back and replace with a fully compliant door. So that would relate to some of them. And then, as you can see, sometimes it was problematic to get access. So orders were raised, and then whenever I went through the system and interrogated it, in some cases there have been a number of attempts at access, but then there was no escalation to the neighbourhood team, which is what should have happened, in order to contact residents to say, look, in terms of your tenancy, it's really important that we get access and to explain. So although they sort of sit with me, I'm going between repairs and the neighbourhood team trying to make sure that those arrangements are in place.
Now, you say there that orders have been raised but have been abandoned, sometimes due to non-access, but no escalation has been undertaken, so action remains outstanding. Abandoned by whom?
I think the repairs system.
Why would the repairs system abandon orders?
Probably best to ask Graham Webb because he will understand the detail, but I think the process is that there'll be a certain number of attempts made, and then, wrongly in my view, they would then become abandoned. What they should do is be escalated, I think, which is what I was trying to get them to implement.
Escalated to whom?
Well, within the repairs team, there should have been a way that they
Right.
forgotten the term, a way that they should have been able to, like almost a jeopardy list, I suppose is what I mean.
Right. Why had that not taken place? Do you know?
I don't know, sorry. I think it was only really in terms of when I was interrogating works orders that I had requested and couldn't confirm that they'd been complete that some of these things came to my attention. And when they did, I would speak to Graham and his staff to see if we could look at more effective ways of dealing.
Looking at Neighbourhood Management South, the other area of breakdown, just looking at the explanation there, was that typical of the kind of explanations that you received for a team's failure to close down an FRA action?
This is sometimes what we'd receive. It was a variety of things, but yeah, sometimes.
Can we then look at the minutes for the 13th of June 2017 at TMO 100-17155, the day before the fire?
Yes.
Page 1. Health and Safety meeting, 13th June, 10 a.m. Barbara Matthews is there, Janet, you're there, and Peter Madison is there. And at page 3, please. Paragraph 3.1, FRA actions. BM expressed concern at the volume of actions which remain outstanding. She emphasised the importance of completing these in a timely manner, not least because they will continue to be raised, particularly as the FRA reviews become more frequent. Given Barbara Matthews' concern as recorded in the minutes up to this time, do you accept that there was still, as at the day before the fire at least, clearly an issue in terms of closing down actions in a timely manner?
My recollection is there'd been a tremendous amount of progress made, but it was still a position that we were pushing on to improve. So yes, there were still things that needed to be attended to.
And at the time of that last meeting in June 2017, would you agree that the TMO had not managed to get on top of the number of outstanding, by which I mean past due, FRA actions within its properties?
Certainly not completely, no.
No. And can you explain why, despite Ms Matthews' very clear call for outstanding FRAs to be closed out, and a stubborn corpus of 12 months plus FRA actions, she was still making that request at the time of the fire?
I mean, I can't speak for others, but I know that some of the things which were down to the health and safety team, just as per the explanation we've just discussed, were really a challenge for me to get them progressed. There were some things were outside of our control in terms of access, and there were systems in place, for example, the one that came to light about abandoning repairs that I hadn't previously been aware of. I can't give you an explanation for other people's. I only really know what the detail of what I struggled with.
Now, we'll turn to specific implementation of actions at Grenfell Tower in due course. Before we do that, there are some preliminary questions about FRAs. We know that Carl Stokes produced an FRA, fire risk assessment, and an action plan for Grenfell Tower on the 20th of June 2016. That's at CST 403069. Did you know that the vast majority of the actions identified by Carl Stokes in the April 2016 FRA for Grenfell Tower were identified as still presenting a risk in the June version?
I think I was aware of that. My recollection is that we knew that we were going to instruct him to carry out a fire risk assessment at the conclusion of the work, and actually we instructed him to go in April so that we would be identifying what information we required from the contractors before they left site, because contractors notoriously, when they leave site, are a bit more challenging to get documentation from. So it was partly to identify what he was going to be needing in the June. So I wasn't surprised that some of them were outstanding, but I don't know beyond that.
Right, and why were so many items identified by Mr Stokes in his April 2016 FRA still outstanding as of June?
I can't comment on that without looking at the detail, but as I say, I do know that some of those documents wouldn't have been readily available, I believe, until closer to completion of the contract on site. But he was raising them in advance so that we knew we had to start hassling the project team and the contractors and whoever to provide them.
In numbers terms, did you know that there were 42 items identified in the April 2016 version which had not been cured as of June?
I didn't know that in numbers terms. No.
Right. Given that all but 3 of the actions from the April 2016 had been assessed as high priority, all but 3, and so should have been rectified, on your understanding, within 3 weeks, or there should have been interim measures for them, how come so many of those items had not been addressed before the 20th of June, when he did his June FRA?
I can't give you an explanation. I would reiterate that some of the documentation may not have been readily available until closer to the end of the contract. So some of that, some of the certification, the Regulation 38 information may not have been available. But I can't, sorry, without looking at the detail.
No, well, let's try and work it through with a worked example in detail. Can we look, please, at the April 2016 record of significant findings and actions at TMO 00873-871, page 7. And if we look at item 19B at the top of your screen there, you can see that it's a red item, high. There are no operating instructions or as installed diagrams located next to the automatic opening vents control panel. How is this control panel accessed? And the action is provide operating instructions and as installed diagrams located next to the AOV control panel along with access information. And then action is Claire W. And then the last column, we will be fitting a cover to AOV pane and operating instructions inside with keys. And I didn't read the bit about Rydens in the middle column there, to be fitting a cover. So that was the content of the April 2016 record,
Yes.
significant findings and actions. We then look at the W2. We can see, let's look at that, TMO 00873-869, page 2. It looks as if this outstanding item goes on to W2 as item 19A. If you look at, it's not a very easy document to navigate, but do you see?
I can't see a reference on it, sorry.
If my page number is right. I think the answer is there isn't anything on that until August 2016.
Okay.
But if you go to page 2, I can show this to you. If you go to the second box, and look at the second box, top line,
Okay.
where it says process completed. You see that? Wednesday, 31st of August 2016.
Yes.
Can you explain why this item, and I'm afraid I'm not able to identify which the item is, but are you able to identify why that only goes on there on the 31st of August 2016?
No. No, I mean, I was seeking the information from Claire Williams, who was clearly in liaison with Rydens about providing the documentation that's required. And I can't give you an explanation other than I didn't receive confirmation until that time.
Right. Right. And why did you consider that it was appropriate to leave items such as that without taking action at all for some 4 months?
I wouldn't have taken no action at all. I would have chased up Claire repeatedly in the interim.
Right.
She's relying on Rydens to provide the information, and I'm in good faith expecting that any day. Unfortunately, it looks like it did take a while to come through, but it looked like it was going to be straightforward, and it looked like it could be resolved quite swiftly.
Right. It looks, if you go to the bottom of the page, there's a big blue arrow, tell me how this works. It looks as if this is a history starting at the bottom, and there's a sort of Monty Python-esque finger coming out from the left-hand side. I don't know what that indicates, but process started, Cyril Morris, 10th of August 2016. HS fire risk assessment process started at stage initial. And then you can see the dates going up. Process completed at the end of August 2016.
Yeah.
Now, was that in relation to the April 2016 FRA, do you know, or the June?
I think it would be June.
Right. Why do you say that?
Well, partly a conversation that you and I had earlier about the June items not making it on until August. But it isn't clear from here. I'm just going by what we discussed earlier.
Let's look at a different part of W2, TMO 008738442. This is your JW10.
Okay.
TMO 008738442. Yes. Could you just explain what this document is? We thought it was W2, but is that right?
It's a download that I've got from W2 that you could do a conversion into Excel. So I've run the information from W2 and it's produced it in an Excel document.
Right.
Okay.
And you can see there that the inputs on that page and the trouble is I can't navigate it to show you where it starts.
And line 38, I think, is what you're referring to.
Yes, line 38 is the bottom, 10th of August 2016.
Yes.
19, you can see 19C. 19A is item 37, which I think is what I want.
Okay.
That's become 19A in the June version.
Right.
And you can see that that's still outstanding. My question is, why was it only inputted on the 10th of August 2016 when it had appeared in the June FRA?
I can't give you an explanation for that. That would be really unusual for us to cause any delay because we always prioritised it.
Do you remember whether Mr. Stokes discussed with you the issue, the items he had identified in his April 2016 FRA action plan, most of which, or at least many of which were high priority, reds, had not been addressed by the time of the June 2016 FRA?
It's likely he would have done, but I don't recall specifically.
What did you tell him? What answer did you give him?
Well, I may well have run a report such as this and talked him through what I knew had been completed and what I knew, whether there were hold-ups or delays or what I was imminently waiting to have completed. Or he may have actually gone and spoken to Claire Williams because a lot of the issues obviously were inevitably related to the project.
Now, can I ask you, please, to go back to the fire safety question in 2013 and the discussion of the draft Hodgson report in August 2013. This is TMO 008998807. And I don't think I've shown you this before.
No.
You can see that it's an executive team meeting. You're not present, which is one of the reasons why I hadn't shown it to you before. But if we go to the bottom of page 1, you can see 1.4. It says, although there was a lot of operational action in the report, that's the Hodgson report in draft, it did not help us with go over the page, organisational structure / management. Peter Madison was concerned that the fire risk assessments were substandard and could put the organisation at risk. There was also some concern that high-risk blocks were being classified as low risk and vice versa. Just pausing there, was that something Mr. Madison ever took up with you?
No, never.
Never, right. And then a little bit lower down, it says, it was agreed to set up a meeting with Matt Hodgson, Peter Madison and Janice Wray to discuss the way forward. Peter had suggested he take on the responsibility for all areas, including asbestos and fire risk, which was still with Janice Wray, and Janice Wray would have a more strategic role and work with the fire brigade. Did such a meeting ever take place?
I've got no recollection of such a meeting.
Did a discussion, even if not in a meeting, ever take place between you, Peter Madison, and Matt Hodgson?
No, I don't believe so.
Right. And then it says the possibility of Adrian Bayman transferring to A&R to be considered so that Peter Madison could resource this area of work. Governance would be the reorganised Health and Safety Committee and also the A&R Health and Safety Group, which Sasa Jevons would review and chair herself. Matt Hodgson's report to reflect this structure. Do you remember that discussion or any discussion on that topic with Peter Madison or anybody else?
No. The only thing that's, I think, relevant at this point is we discussed Michael Lyon's policy statement yesterday.
We did.
And his structure that he set out may have had some bearing on this dialogue, which I was unaware of.
Did Mr. Madison or anybody else raise any concerns with you about your capacity to manage fire risk?
No, he didn't.
Or about the quality of Mr. Stakes' FRAs?
No, I'm really surprised to read that, actually,
Right.
because I'm not aware that he asked to see very many of them. So I'm not sure he would have reviewed very many of the assessments themselves.
Right. So is your evidence that none of these suggestions were ever discussed with you, let alone taken up?
Definitely none of them were discussed with me.
Right.
They weren't taken up.
Can we go to TMO 00849798, please? This is an executive team meeting of the 18th of September 2013, and for self-evident reasons you're not present, but there's a discussion about the same topic.
Right.
If we go to page 6, please, second bullet point down, we can see there's a discussion along the lines of clienting of fire risk assessments have been taken over by A&R, which were due to be completed by mid-October. Were you aware of any plan for A&R, Assets and Regeneration, to take over management of the fire risk assessment?
No.
Did you want that to happen?
I'd never been consulted on that happening. It wouldn't really be for me to say.
Had you been consulted, would you want that to happen?
I want it to happen. I suppose from a health and safety perspective, I would have been concerned about that happening because the actions that were not being progressed swiftly enough all sat within that division. So actually, if you put everything in one division where there are potentially are problems about getting things done in the right time frame, then I didn't see that was a good thing necessarily.
I see. Peter Madison confirmed that it didn't in fact happen. Do you know why it didn't happen?
No, I didn't know it was even discussed at this stage, so sorry, no idea.
Can we then go to TMO 00856238, please? Page 2 of this email run. This is an email from you to Anthony Parks on the 31st of January 2014.
Yeah.
We can pick it up just at the very bottom of page 1 where we can see your name as the outgoing. Oh, you can't quite see it. Well, it's just below the Anthony, from Janice Wray, and then over to the top of page 2, to 31st January to Anthony Parks. Dear Anthony, attached is a copy of the fire safety policy that Michael has drafted as an alternative to the one which I recently consulted in and issued to the LFB. Just pausing there, that must have been the November 2013 policy we saw yesterday, yes?
Yes.
Yes. This is based on Michael's recommendation that responsibility for fire safety in its entirety transfers to A&R. Grateful if you could advise whether this is the way the organisation wishes to go. Now, clearly, you're referring to Michael Lyons' alternative policy that you identified yesterday in your evidence, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
And do you know why Mr. Lyons had recommended that responsibility for fire safety should be transferred to Assets and Regeneration?
No, I didn't know if it was just him speculating about whether that would be a good way for the organisation to go. Having read the exec team minutes, it may be that he's being briefed to produce something of that nature. I don't know, really.
Going to page 1, we'll take this quickly, given that it didn't happen. On page 1, 7th of February 2014, Parks' email to you. Dear Janice, I've reviewed the fire safety policies drafted by Michael. Layout of the policy is clear, etc., etc. And then he goes on to say, However, the section on roles and responsibilities does not meet with the agreed policy to split the strategic corporate role from the operational role, etc. And he goes on to say other things about management structure. As far as you know, was Mr. Parks objecting to the role of fire contract manager that he refers to?
I sort of, yeah, I mean, I took this to mean that this wasn't the way the organisation wanted to go. He didn't obviously give me any background about what discussions had taken place, so I didn't know if it was something that Michael just came up with as a concept or whether it was he'd been asked to put something together. And
Right. If we then go to the policy, TMO 100407090, we can see, we looked at this yesterday. This is his draft fire safety policy dated January 2014.
yeah.
We can see that you are identified there as the author together with him. I don't think we looked at this version yesterday, but was this the version that you sent Anthony Parks?
No, I don't think so. I think it was the other version.
Right. Have you ever seen this one before then?
I think we looked at this yesterday, and I must have seen it before, but
Right. The one I think we looked at yesterday with your name on had May in it, but no matter. Okay. Can we go to page 6? This is where I want to show you what it says and ask you about.
Okay.
Page 6, you can see under the third subheader, it says Fire Contract Manager. The Fire Contract Manager will be tasked with the strategic management of fire precautions within the responsibility of Kensington and Chelsea TMO, reporting directly to the Head of Contract Management and shall, and you can see a list of things there, formulate and revise TMO's fire plan, conduct and arrange audits to ensure that provisions within the fire safety policy are being enforced to the standard required, ensure sufficient information, instruction and training is carried out, ensure that the fire precautions are maintained effectively, investigate fires and introduce controls, appoint a designated person, etc., etc. This role of a fire contract manager, was that ever discussed in any meeting you attended?
No.
No. Did you ever have any discussions with Anthony Parks about that specific role?
No, literally the email that you just showed is the only correspondence I had with Anthony on the
Right.
matter.
I mean, clearly, if one goes to page 7, there's a distinction between the fire contract manager and the health and safety manager. Was there ever any discussion you were party to which involved the proposal that these two roles should be split?
No, there wasn't.
Right. So your role included all the majority of the responsibilities set out in the list for the fire contract manager we can see in Mr. Lyons' draft?
Majority, yeah.
Yes, I see. Was there a need in the TMO at the time for a person with specific responsibility for the management of fire risk or fire safety, as opposed to health and safety more generally?
We've discussed it several times. There was a need for more resource, whether it needed to be a separation of roles or just a boosted resource, would have been a decision for somebody further, more senior than me.
Right. Now, we don't need to go to it, but the later version of this document, which I did show you briefly yesterday, May 2014, at TMO 008566458, there's no need to look at it, had a section on roles and responsibilities, but the role of fire contract manager had disappeared. Can you help us about why it had gone?
I suspect, I'd forgotten about this, I suspect that I may have doctored this document, edited it, and thought of having a separate fire safety policy statement, done some work on it, and then put it to one side and not gone back to it. So I suspect that's what the one that you showed me is, an updated version that I had worked on but was never adopted.
Correct, but was it you who removed the proposal for a fire contract manager?
It probably was, because by then it was clear
Right.
that there wasn't going to be one.
I see. So was it always your view that there did not need to be a separate fire contract manager and that you could manage perfectly well within the umbrella of your work as the health and safety manager?
As I've said, I wasn't consulted. The only information I ever had about the suggestion was what came from Michael Lyons. I took a view from Anthony, who was my manager, and he sort of dismissed it. So to the best of my knowledge, it wasn't even up for consideration, or if it was, I wasn't party to any discussions. So I didn't think it was realistically on the table.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about deficiency notices, procedure and process. We talked about closeout actions for FRAs. I want to switch to the same question, but in respect of deficiency and enforcement notices from the LFB. Can we start with your July 2020 statement, please, at TMO 00873799, page 18, paragraph 35. And you refer there to the procedure for dealing with LFB deficiency notices, and those particularly of January 2016. TMO 00873799, page 18, paragraph 35. Now, in 34, you give the background, the 17th of November 2016, notice of deficiency for Grenfell,
Yes.
which had 7 fire safety matters in it. And then you say in paragraph 35, of relevance to this question is the TMO procedure for dealing with LFB deficiency notices dated January 2016, which set out the following. Depending on the nature of the breaches, the H&S team will send a copy of this notice to the relevant teams and discuss with them the necessary remedial action and timescale for this. H&S team monitor completion of the necessary works. Deficiency notices and broadly compliant letters and progress with completing the actions they raise are reported to the Health and Safety Committee. Further, a summary of these are provided in the company's annual Health and Safety Report. Now let's look at the document itself. This is at TMO 00840480. And it's paper 3, so it would have been produced to a meeting, and we know that it was in fact produced to the 19th of January 2016 Health and Safety Committee meeting. We'll look at the minutes of that in a moment. Just looking at this document, did you draft this?
Yes.
You did. What prompted you to draft it?
Actually, I think it was a request by Peter Madison.
Oh, was it?
It reflects the process or the procedure that we were following, but we had never documented it, and it seemed sensible.
Right. Now, this is January 2016.
Yeah.
And do you recall that the Adair Tower enforcement notices had come in
Yeah.
the month before?
Yeah, December and January, yeah.
Indeed. Were they a prompt for the production of this document?
No, not really, because
Right.
they're talking about deficiency notices. The enforcement notices were treated entirely differently.
Did you receive any help in drafting or finalising this policy?
Unlikely.
Right. Did you ask the LFB's fire safety team to consider it or approve it or review it in any way?
No, because generally, Fire Brigade had been pretty low-key about deficiency notices. They saw them as being non-statutory notices. Often the defects that they were identifying, they felt themselves were relatively minor deficiency notice. They didn't require any formal sign-off. I would feed back to them often on progress at liaison meetings, but they would rarely ever seek an update.
Now, let's go to the minutes of the meeting. TMO 100-12670. 19th of January 2016. You're there. If we go to page 4, we can see at paragraph 3.7 that it says JW summarised the process for deficiency notices as set out in paper 3. Just to reiterate, these tend to be received by JW, are brought to this committee and are circulated to the teams with actions and timescale for completion. PM requested a copy of any deficiency notice where defects related to the work of his team. Did you get any feedback at this meeting about this policy?
No, I don't believe so.
Did you usually provide copies of the deficiency notice to the relevant teams as requested by Peter Madison for his team?
Yes. And that is exactly the procedure that we've documented, is when on receipt of a deficiency notice, we would allocate the work, email a scanned copy to the individual and ask them to advise us progress.
Was the policy adopted formally or approved formally at this meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Then let's go back to the policy. TMO 00840480. if we go to the heading, progressing issues by LFB, item 4 towards the bottom of your screen, it says, the fire safety team will generally telephone the TMO health and safety team following their audit to raise queries, request confirmation of maintenance arrangements, a copy of the fire risk assessment, and to outline any breaches. They will confirm if it is their intention to issue a notification of fire safety deficiencies, or alternatively, if they intend to send a letter confirming that they consider the block to be broadly compliant with no statutory breach at the time of the audit. When a notice is issued, a paper copy is sent by post for the attention of the health and safety team. Depending upon the nature of the breaches, the health and safety team will send a copy of this notice to the relevant teams and discuss with them the necessary remedial action and timescale for this. H&S team monitor completion of the necessary works. Now, did the fire safety team from the LFB generally telephone the TMO following their audit to raise queries and ask for confirmation of maintenance arrangement?
Often that is the case, yes.
Would you usually provide them with confirmation?
Yeah, I mean, I would try and provide them with whatever it is they've requested. So
Right.
if they asked for the fire risk assessment, we'd send that. If they asked for maintenance documentation, I would speak to the compliance team, contracts management team, and get what they required and email it to them as soon as I could.
Right, and it says here that they would outline any breaches. So would they discuss, was this the policy, that they would discuss each of the breaches with you?
Generally, when they telephoned, they would say, oh, we've been to this block, because we often didn't know in advance where they'd be attending. I've been to this block today, and it was generally okay, but we had one or two concerns, and I'll email you separately, but this is what, but in the meantime, could you confirm? And sometimes it was just information that they needed, which allowed them to complete their audit, because I think it's all kind of numerical, and at the end it decides whether a deficiency notice is going to be served or not.
Once you'd received a notification of fire safety deficiencies, the procedure notes that the H&S team would send a copy of the notice to the relevant teams and discuss with them the necessary remedial action and timescales for this. H&S team, who does that refer to? Is that
Adrian and me.
Right, okay.
And so-
And Adrian, Bowman and you. Yeah. And when you discussed timescale for completing the action, how did you determine what the timescale should be?
It depended on the nature of the breach, really. If it's something that's really should be fairly straightforward, if it's communal storage or anything of that nature, I would be asking the estate services team leader to ensure that it was turned around in 24 hours, 48 hours, if it possibly could be, and also that the caretaker go and ESA go and speak to the resident and explain why it's important, so not to happen again. If it's more complicated, I'm trying to think. If it's, for example, a leaseholder door that's potentially non-compliant, that's much more challenging because it's demise to the resident, and we've never yet kind of got to a stage where we had successful enforcement positions. So we would be looking for the home ownership team to start engaging with that resident, but that's more difficult to quantify. I mean, it's clearly urgent, but we would have difficulty turning it around as quickly as we would wish.
The deficiency notices had their own deadlines in, didn't they?
Yes, often 6 months.
Well, why not use those?
Well, yeah, but and clearly I would have used those, but some things can be done in a few days, and so I want them done in a few days. I'm not going to wait until there's that's the cut-off period for the deficiency notice. But anything that we can and should do more swiftly than that, then that's what we would try to do.
Now, the procedure says, as I've shown you, that deficiency notices and broadly compliant. In fact, I haven't shown you this, I should read it out. Deficiency notices and broadly compliant letters and progress with completing the actions they raise are reported to the Health and Safety Committee. Further, a summary of these are provided in the company's annual health and safety report. That's what the procedure says. If we just go next to your July 2020 statement, paragraph 36, just below where we were reading, TMO 00873-799, page 18, paragraph 36, you say there, this procedure therefore required the TMO to monitor completion of the necessary works and progress actions through the Health and Safety Committee, but it did not specify that these actions be closed out using the same recording process or systems as the FRA programme. It is for this reason that progress made by the TMO in closing out the actions raised in the above NOD, Notice of Deficiency, was monitored in Health and Safety Committee and LFB and TMO bi-monthly meetings following its receipt, rather than being closed out through W2 or CRM. This is recorded in the following meeting minutes and reports. Now, you exhibit some. So, in summary, does it tell us that the TMO essentially had two systems running in parallel, one for closing out FRA actions via W2, by this stage certainly W2, and secondly, complying with deficiency notices by way of monitoring through the Health and Safety Committee and bi-monthly meetings with the LFB?
Yes.
Right.
Largely because we actually didn't receive very many deficiency notices, so we had never created a dedicated workflow. However, by the time the fire happened, I'd been thinking we could set one up on CRM because it was much more straightforward. We had access to a system. Sorry to interrupt you.
So does that mean that you didn't input the actions that were required as a result of a deficiency notice into the W2 system so that you could monitor it?
No, we didn't.
Why was that?
It just wasn't set up in that way. And just to reiterate, we actually generally didn't get very many of them. And some years we might have two, some years we might have half a dozen. But and often there would only be 2 or 3 actions, so it was relatively straightforward to keep on top of them in the way that I've outlined.
Was it your decision when you drafted this policy not to amalgamate the two streams?
Well, it went to Health and Safety Committee for discussion and for approval. So if anyone else could have said, I feel strongly that we should be doing that, I don't think it was my decision. It was the policy, the procedure was something that I drafted for discussion, but everybody had buy-in into it.
Why did you decide that the actions required through a deficiency notice were not to be monitored through W2?
Well, as I said, we didn't get very many. We would have had to have a specific workflow. We knew that W2 was coming to the end of its life and we were moving across to a different software system. And at that point, I think we would have got to the stage of thinking, well, actually, let's set up a simple one in that.
Does this mean that you didn't, in fact, use any electronic records or automated systems at all to keep track of the necessary actions required by the LFB and their deficiencies?
Yes, that's probably true.
How were you able to monitor progress and completion of those actions if you didn't use an electronic workflow?
Well, in the years when we had 2 a year, it wasn't really a big ask, and they sat at the top of my in tray, and I would ring the relevant people on a regular basis or go and speak to them. If we were starting to get more of those, then that would have preempted exactly what you're suggesting, that we would have had an electronic system.
Let's see how it was done then. Let's take the Grenfell deficiency notice of the 17th of November 2016, which you exhibit at paragraph 38 of your statement on page 19, which we don't need to look at. But let's look at the document. It's TMO 00873-834. And you can see there that it's got manuscript on it with updates added Feb 17. Is that your handwriting?
It is, yes.
Right. And if you scroll down, please, to page 5, you can see the schedule.
Yeah.
And again, is that your handwriting?
It is, yeah.
So just help us. Is it right that although the actions arising from the notice were progressed, it was progressed in this way, you would simply write on the document?
On this occasion, or I would write on a separate document and append it to it. It depended.
And then where would you put it?
It literally would sit in the top of my in tray. I didn't have much paper by that stage, so they were.
How would you monitor? How would you keep up with monitoring it and making sure you knew what progress was happening?
As I say, we literally did not get very many of them. I was always seeking to give feedback to the TMO LFB liaison meeting, which was every 2 months. So as a minimum, I was going to be ensuring that I'd been through and identified what was going on so that I was able to update them.
Right. Just help me then. Look at Article 11, Item 1. You've written under actions to be taken, neighbourhood team instructed to treat as zero tolerance, items removed and regular inspections ongoing. When were the neighbourhood instructed to treat as zero tolerance?
I had written to, was it Nikki? It was probably Nikki at that stage, and provided her with a copy of this and said, this is what we need to do going forward, and she must have confirmed that that was the case.
I mean, if 3 weeks later you wanted to find out and remind yourself when you had given these instructions to the neighbourhood team, you take this document off your pile on your desk, what would you go to work out when you had given those instructions?
Well, the updates are added here on the 17th of February, so I would work on that basis.
Well, what would you? How would you find out when you had instructed the neighbourhood team?
I would probably have an email stored somewhere that I would access, but I would have received confirmation pretty swiftly, because this is something that they should adopt immediately.
Right. Now, you say in your June 2020 statement, let me show this to you, TMO 00873 page 17, paragraph 70. That I've been asked to confirm whether the spreadsheets used to track FRA actions were generated using W2 or CRM. As stated above, I used a workflow on W2 to allocate and track progress with the actions up until a week or so before the fire. CRM was being introduced around this time, and the intention was to close out old actions on W2 and log new actions on CRM. The new systems may have had slight differences. However, in my view, they were both effective at tracking progress and identifying outstanding actions, while reports produced from these two systems may have looked slightly different. In substance, they were no different. Given that you discovered or considered that W2 and then the successor system, CRM, as efficient, what was the point of having a policy which you drafted and which was then adopted, which did not include monitoring deficiency notices using either W2 or CRM? Was it just the sheer low numbers?
Yes.
But why give yourself the extra work?
Can I just say that it sounds really straightforward, but in order to get a workflow, a dedicated workflow on W2, it means going through a load of hoops with the IT team. It's not straightforward, and they would have had to put something together for me to trial. It wouldn't have been a sort of quick fix. We were having very low numbers, and I also knew that W2 was getting to the end of its lifespan. So in my mind, I had thought once CRM is on board, that may be something that it would be sensible to have a workflow which will be much more straightforward to put together. But yeah, it was just a combination of the two. I felt like what we were doing was working. We were getting low numbers, and we sort of had a view that going forward it's something that we could do differently and we could monitor more rigorously. But at this stage, we didn't feel like we needed to.
Now, you've suggested in your witness statement, your July 2020 statement, that the Health and Safety Committee and the LFB bi-monthly meetings would be the fora in which deficiency items would be monitored. And would progress on actions in deficiency notices become standing agenda items for the bi-monthly meetings?
Probably not standing agenda items. It probably, as I say, the brigade hardly ever actually sought out an update on deficiency notices. I probably would have given them some verbal feedback. And probably it should have been a standing agenda item, but I'm not sure it made it to
Right.
that.
Did that mean that it would be up to you to report the progress that had been made in actioning the items raised on an ad hoc, as and when basis?
Usually, yes.
Yes. I'm going to change to a completely different topic now. Mr. Chairman, there's a possibility I could cover it in 10 minutes, but it may not be the case.
How are you getting on generally?
I think I have a bid for it. Well, is the answer.
I mean, that answer suggests that we might give ourselves the indulgence of an early afternoon.
Yes, I'm happy to take the chance, so long as that's noted as a credit in my favour.
What about mine? Sorry.
I think I'm more concerned about a credit as far as Ms. Ray's concerned.
Yes, all right.
You've probably had enough for the day if you get the chance to stop now, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't mind actually. I can
know,
happily do another 10 minutes. But
we've only got 5 minutes or so to go, so
Now
I
we
think
have.
Yeah.
we'll stop at that point. Okay. All right. Well, as you know, we're going to have to ask you to come back again tomorrow for more questions. So, yes, I'm sorry about that. So we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow, please. And as before, please don't discuss your evidence or anything to do with it with anyone while you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Thank you very much. We'll see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Willett. 10 o'clock tomorrow.